This is Jump, Book 1 of the Robert March Chronicles, Chapter 11.
I just stood there and looked at her. Lori. My heart stopped, then started again. It broke, then reassembled itself. She quickly scanned the area in front of the house. She spotted Frank sitting in the car.
He's with you, right?
Yeah.
Okay, come on in.
I entered the foyer of the house and she locked the door behind us. She turned and looked at me. It took everything I had to not take her in my arms.
Let's get one thing straight here. I'm not her, and you're not him. He's dead, and you and I are pretty much strangers to each other. Got that?
Yes.
Sorry to be so blunt.
I had to remind myself that she was a woman in mourning.
Follow me.
She turned and walked towards the back of the house. Damn, she was beautiful. How much more of this could I take? She opened a door in the hallway that revealed steps leading down to the cellar. I followed her as she descended. She walked over to a large safe near the back wall. She entered the combination, opened it, reached in, and grabbed a tiny box, something like what a ring would come in. Inside was a vintage USB-style thumb drive.
This should work where you're from, right?
Yeah, this'll work. We looked at each other for an awkward moment. Then I asked, "How much do you know about all this, Lori?"
Enough to know that all this is what got him killed.
Her eyes began to fill with tears. I couldn't help myself. I embraced her.
Don't. Please. This is cruel.
Just then, my phone rang. It was from the 911 area code. Hello? Static. Then,
Get out of there, Robert. Now. Run.
the line went dead. We gotta go.
What?
I grabbed her hand and we scrambled up the stairs. We got to the main floor and dashed out of the front door. We took off in a sprint toward the car where Frank waited. Then, the world blew up. The explosion was deafening. The destruction was near complete. Lori's house was pretty much obliterated, while the surrounding houses were barely damaged. It was a precision strike. We were knocked flat by the pressure wave and hit by a momentary blast of intense heat, but we somehow managed to avoid being harmed. We were lucky to be alive. It was pretty obvious someone wanted me and Lori vaporized, along with whatever was on that thumb drive. We got back to our feet and ran toward the car. We jumped in and Frank tore out like a bat out of hell. Before long, we were on Interstate 5, heading south.
He knew early on that someone was after him. He turned to me as the only person he could trust.
Lori unrolled the details of her relationship with Dr. March as we sped through the dark, moonless countryside of rural Oregon.
He was already a public figure when Kaylin happened. He discovered a cure for pancreatic cancer back in 2028. It made him famous.
She explained that because of the cancer cure discovery, the March Institute grew exponentially in both stature and funding. Within a couple of years, it had become one of the most important medical research facilities in the world. When the urgent call went out for research into a Kaylin vaccine in late 2031, the March Institute went into overdrive. They were soon conducting clinical trials in various hospitals up and down the West Coast, including Providence Medical Center, where Lori was a nurse. Dr. March paid a visit to Providence Medical Center one day during the trials. One thing led to another.
Our relationship was simple in the beginning. Just a couple of old friends who had reunited. But it evolved into something more complicated. He needed a friend, someone he could talk to, someone he could be honest with, someone he could trust. And apparently, that person wasn't his wife. For better or worse, I was willing to be that person for him. After all, we knew each other better than anyone else in the world. I had no relationship entanglements, no husband, not even a boyfriend. And to be honest, I had never really stopped loving him. It wasn't a big step from being professional friends to something more involved. Then the other showed up, and things got weird.
How did you find out about the other?
Robert told me he'd realized something strange was going on when he began getting reports from people seeing him at events that he hadn't attended. Friends mentioned spotting him around town when he knew he was elsewhere. Things like that. He grew suspicious. It was like he had a twin who had assumed his identity. Eventually, he caught him.
Caught him? How?
He caught him breaking into his office. He just walked in like he owned the place. I mean, a DNA security perimeter isn't much of a deterrent to someone who has your exact DNA. He stole Robert's computer access fob from his office safe. Robert watched him do it, remotely, sitting down in his bunker.
So, the other gained access to Robert's computer?
No. Robert had set a trap. As long as he was in the bunker, no one could enter, even if they passed the DNA scan. And any attempted access would trigger a device that would inject the intruder's hand with a tracker. When the other realized he'd been tagged, he ran away. Robert tracked him for a day or so, but he disappeared somewhere in Southern California. Literally fell off the map. He never saw him again. He just vanished, along with that access fob.
So what was he after? The other?
Well, the way Robert put it to me was that there was only one thing on that computer that could have any value to anyone other than himself. So he scrubbed it, but not before transferring it, and some other things, to that old USB drive you have in your pocket.
She looked at me a bit wary.
Somehow, he knew you were coming.
How could he know that?
I don't know, but I could tell there was more to the story than he was letting on. I mean, I know Robert. He was a good man. He would never lie to me. But I also know he wasn't telling me the whole truth. There was something else.
What could it be?
Well, if you don't know, it looks like we'll never know.
We crossed the border into California around midnight. With Lori as our guide, we exited the interstate and headed west for several miles through rural scrubland. We eventually came to a private drive secured with an elaborate metal barrier.
Pull in here, Frank.
Near the entrance, there was a scanner that looked like the one outside Dr. March's bunker. She looked at me and said,
"You'll need to do it."
I got out, walked up to the scanner, and put my hand on it. The barrier rumbled as it rolled open. I got back in the car and Frank entered the property.
It's about a mile down this road.
Eventually, we came to a clearing where a small outbuilding stood nestled at the foot of a high, rocky bluff. It appeared to be a storage shed of some kind.
Park here.
We got out and walked up to the door of the shed. Another scanner. I touched it. The locks on the door clicked. The door slid open. Inside the shed were some tools, a small tractor, and some camping gear. Toward the back, there was another door. Actually, a couple of doors that were angled back in a way that reminded me of the entrance to a storm shelter. I did the scan, and Lori and Frank pulled the doors open. There was a short staircase that led down into what appeared to be a tunnel that ran straight into the side of the bluff. We followed Lori in. One more door at the end of the tunnel. I scanned, Lori opened, and we stepped into what can only be called a mansion built into the side of a mountain, dominated by a huge glass wall that looked out into the valley below. Amazing.
Yes, it is. He called it his Fortress of Solitude. Like Superman, you know.
Oh, I know.
I know you know.
She actually allowed herself to smile a little. I had missed that smile.
We'll stay here until morning. I'll show you to your rooms.
My room was well appointed, more akin to a luxury hotel suite than a typical guest bedroom. Along one wall was a workstation, monitors, keyboard, and power outlets arrayed on a nice-sized desk. Also on the desk was a small backpack. I unzipped it, looked inside, and checked out its contents. An antique MacBook, a power supply, and a fully loaded military surplus Sig Sauer. It seemed the good doctor had thought of everything. I opened the computer, powered it up, inserted Dr. March's thumb drive, and began exploring its contents. I was soon immersed in the sick and shocking details of just what had happened here leading up to the Kalen outbreak, and what would happen in my own timeline unless I took action. An hour later, I pushed away from the computer and stood. My mind reeled as I contemplated the enormity of what I was involved in and the difficult and dangerous road ahead. I decided that I needed to at least try to get a couple hours of sleep. I was turning the blankets down on my bed when I heard the door open. It was Lori.
I know this is wrong, but...
Her words trailed off as she began to undress.
You've been listening to Jump, Book 1 of the Robert March Chronicles. For more information, visit therobertmarch.com.